Hey guys, I wanted to look at another SIG frame with you all. This is the X Series frame, specifically made for the M18 and M17 with the safety cutout. And as I'm sure you know, the X frame has been out for a long time, and it has sort of become the more preferred SIG frame for the 320s. They make this in polymer and aluminum, and they're using this for not only a lot of their kind of more duty type full-size SIGs, but also their competition SIGs like the X5 and the Spectre Comp. So there's not a whole lot new here, but I do want to look at this more in the context of the M17 because I think with the safety to consider, there is a little bit of difference between this and sort of like a regular non-safety SIG. So this is the frame right here. And really quickly, just to kind of talk about SIG frames, there's basically three categories for the 320. There's the compact category, the carry category, and there's the full-size category. Now, the compact is going to be the size for carry. Those usually fit about 15 round magazines. This is the carry size, which I think is a little bit of a misnomer because, the M17 and 18 are definitely full-size guns, but the frames they use are called carry. And they're called carry because the rail space you get here is kind of truncated. So this is a little more of a versatile rail. It'll fit the 3.9 inch barrels and the 4.7 inch barrels. The full size will only fit the 4.7 inch barrels. Now, if you do want the full size, they offer this in full size as well, but I got the carry size to sort of match the size that comes standard on the M17s. So to start off, the first thing I want to get out of the way is really all the similarities between this frame and the standard 320 frame. That's one thing I like about it is that they really preserve that sort of original 320 look and doesn't make this frame look aftermarket at all, which is really cool. Starting with the front here, you can see a lot of the similarities with how they shape the rails and the nose of the frames. A lot of similarities there, even on the sides, the left or the right side of the frame, they kind of kept the same style with everything. You start to see some differences. I mean, obviously the grips are quite a bit different, which I'll get into in a second, but the one major difference is the way they did the trigger guard. So one of the things that I sort of complained about in the past with the standard 320 trigger guard is sort of how sharp the edges can be, and especially with the undercut here, I feel like it doesn't really give you a lot of space. Sometimes it also kind of feels like it's forcing my fingers down a little bit, so that's one complaint I had, and I think SIG noticed that right away too because they completely smoothed out every part of the trigger guard here, even towards the front. It's a little more smoothed out. So that's nice because it doesn't put as much pressure on your finger when you're going for that grip. And they also really cut out a lot more space here below this inner part of the trigger guard and even cut out a little bit here as well, which is really nice. So it does kind of feel not only more comfortable, but also as if you're getting more of a higher grip on the frame. So that's definitely a welcomed addition. One thing you lose is the cutouts for the mags, which I'll get into a little bit more when I put these together. I can kind of show you more of the mag fit. I do sort of like having this cutout here. I think it makes the mags fit in a little bit better, but I'll show you that in a second. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that they did add a little bit of mag flaring, which is nice. It's always a welcome addition to have some mag flaring, never hurts. And I believe with this frame, you can also attach a mag well, so you can pretty much get more flaring if you need. The other thing is the beaver tail is a very different kind of design. Now, when I've shot these kinds of frames in the past, and I've always had the impression that this beaver tail was cut a little bit higher, but now that I have these side by side, they look to be about the same kind of position there. It's kind of hard to tell exactly because I know this beaver tail extends out a little bit, and it also kind of fans out a little bit more. And when I compared these side by side, I thought my grip would feel a little bit higher with the X Series, but I found, if anything, it actually kind of feels a little bit higher with this one. And that's simply because, as I said, I think the wider beaver tail there, it kind of puts actually more pressure on this sort of knuckle of my thumb. And it almost seems like it's like a shield keeping my hand down, which I don't think is really necessary because with as I mentioned before, the already high bore axis of the 320, you don't really need a lot of protection of that beaver tail. So I think the one here is it's good enough because it kind of allows my thumb to get up there on the frame without any kind of obstruction. So that's just one minor difference, but it is splitting hairs. I think the designs are both fine. But that's just like one little thing I thought I wanted to point out. So another quick little difference is that the original frame has a sort of shield regard for the slide release. It's not super important to have that. I know some shooters, they might position their thumb underneath that slide stop, and if when they're shooting, they might bump it and prematurely lock the slide. That's kind of more of an issue of fixing your grip, but having a shield here just kind of prevents that from happening. Again, it's not really super necessary, but similar to the mag flaring, it's a welcome addition. It doesn't really hurt to have it. So I kind of wish they kept it in this frame, but it's not a big deal that they took it out. The other improvement with the X frame is the addition of much more texturing, which is really nice. Ironically, though, I think they actually gave a little less texturing in the back, so I'm not sure why. Now, this is the large frame I have here, but the same is on the medium frame. It goes to the same height on both medium and large frames. But with the X series, for whatever reason, they decided to sort of take that away. So I'm not really sure why they did that. But they compensated by giving you more on the sides. So I don't know. I think texturing is pretty important in the back, because that's really where that's what the recoil is usually rotating like this. So you need some good support to keep your hand from slipping right there. So I'm not sure why they did that. But in any case, like most things I'm pointing out, it's not that big of a deal, but little things kind of add up over time. So, ideally, I think they should increase the texturing here, but it's not like a deal breaker by any means. So the last major piece I want to talk about with the differences in the frames is going to be the tops, and you can probably already see what I'm pointing out. This is kind of a big deal when thinking about the M17 and M18. And I never really noticed this before, because every time I shot an X frame, it was with a SIG that did not have a safety. But when you have a safety, it kind of becomes an issue with the extra thickness up here. So it's kind of hard to show this with the camera angle, but basically when you have that grip, your thumb kind of meets some obstruction when it's trying to manipulate either the safety, the slide release, or even the mag release. So that thickness just kind of gets in the way. Whereas what I really like actually about this grip, which I didn't realize until I started comparing these, is that the cutouts here give you much more freedom of movement with your thumb, and it's almost like it's a lot more seamless of an effort to manipulate any parts of the gun. So obviously, when considering a gun with a safety, it's going to be extremely important to make sure that hitting that safety is as seamless and effortless as possible, because if you mess that up in a draw, in a self-defense situation, then you're going to be in big trouble. So to wrap this up, I wanted to show you how it actually fits with the slide and the fire control unit. I just put it together, and it is an empty chamber and no magazine. So yeah, this is pretty much how it looks. And to kind of show you that safety, you can kind of see how my thumb is a little bit kind of pushed out to the side. And so when I try to hit it, I can kind of hit it with my knuckle there. And I can get the tip of my thumb on there, but I have to bring my thumb all the way back, and it kind of messes up my grip a little bit. So with this kind of frame, I'm used to just hitting it with the middle of my thumb like that. But it just takes a little bit more of a conscious effort to make sure I can snag that safety. But also hitting the mag release feels a little more difficult with this grip. I feel like I have to push it in a little bit further to drop the mag. It's kind of hard to show you guys, but I have to just kind of press it in a little bit more. So these are always replaceable. I'm not too worried about that. I've shot a lot of X frames in the past. I don't ever remember the mag release button being kind of difficult to press. It could just be because it's new, maybe it needs breaking in, but I thought I would just point that out in case. The last thing to kind of mention, as I touched upon a little bit earlier, is that I think the mag fit is a little bit tighter, and I'm not sure if it's because it's either just a frame overall, or if it's because it doesn't have the cutouts here like the original Sig does. And I think it might be related to not having the cutouts. I remember the Wilson Combat frame had a little bit of a tighter fit as well. Now, one thing I want to say is that when it comes to actual range time, I really don't notice much of a difference between either of these two. Not to say that grips don't matter, they matter a lot, but I think that sometimes when you're holding a grip dry firing versus actual range time, you notice two completely different things. And sometimes you don't notice anything dry firing, and then you notice it a lot when you shoot. But then other times you notice a lot of things when you're dry firing, but then when it comes to actually shoot the guns, they're pretty much the same results. The one thing I really liked about the X Series is that it kind of has more of that square Glock type shape, which I've always liked. I started off shooting Glocks, and then I moved to FN pistols, and then Sig I moved to after that. And that was my complaint with the the 320 grips, is that they're kind of rounded. Now I'm used to it by now. I have about 4,000 rounds through my M17, so I'm super used to it. But when I did get this grip, it really kind of reminded me of Glock, or even like 1911s to some extent. But I wouldn't say this is like a vast improvement over the original one. I think the biggest thing that I would like to change with the X Series grip is to thin it out towards the top, and then cut away from the width of this beaver tail, because like I said, when I hold it, I just feel like there's a big shield kind of blocking my thumb in particular, and I don't really feel like the bore axis is like any lower, which I thought it would be, because like I said, that beaver tail seems a little bit higher, but I guess they're the same height. But really, it doesn't improve the grip in the ways I thought it would. Still a good grip, but given that this is like $70, I don't think it's really necessary to have to make the switch. They both get the job done, and there's not really a need to spend the extra money unless you really want it. Now, in terms of which one I would recommend, I hate to say this, but I would actually still recommend this grip for duty use or military use, or even home defense. And just the simple reason for that is that I feel this one is a little more combat ready, if you will, for the reasons I mentioned. So the more narrow top of the frame, it just gives you more ease of access to manipulating the gun. And also, I just like these cutouts here. I feel like there's a little bit more of a nicer fit with the magazine. So it would be better to if I can put this trigger guard on this frame, I would love that. Also, like some mag flare would be cool, and maybe just kind of like adjusting the beaver tail, like cutting out some more material here, giving a higher grip if possible. So there's definitely room for improvement. And if any of you have seen my review, I think I did that review after 2,000 rounds, and I had a lot of criticism about this frame. So I'm not saying it's perfect. There's definitely room for improvement, but I think the X Series frame, it doesn't really, it fixes some things, but then it does other things worse. I would still stick with this one. If I can combine these two frames, I think that'd be like one of the best frames you can have on any pistol. But anyway, that is all I got. Let me know what you think about these frames. Do you prefer the X Series? Do you prefer this one? Most people, I haven't met anybody that actually prefers this one, so I think I'm kind of on my own there. But I would love to hear your comments on the frames below. So thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.